Hi everyone, welcome to Witch Hollow Homestead. I bought this organic head of cabbage yesterday, and I bought it with the purpose to make homemade German fermented sauerkraut. Typically, German sauerkraut is actually made by cooking it on the stovetop, adding onions, broth, apples, bacon, and some other spices. In this case, we're going to just be fermenting it with the two main ingredients, which is caraway seeds and juniper berries. As I've previously discussed in my other fermentation videos, but I will mention it here, the salt you use cannot be your typical table salt. You're going to want to use a sea salt, Celtic salt, pink Himalayan salt, just not a table salt that has an anti-caking agent in it. I thought I would take a moment from the recipe to just show you something. I have been asked a couple of times about what I like to listen to or watch while I'm in the kitchen cooking and creating. And as you can see, this is my playlist that I have on my other YouTube channel. And I have a variety of things, but a lot of them are horror related, so like spooky lullabies, rain sounds, ambient sounds. I'm also a really big fan of vintage music from the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And this one here, vintage Halloween music, is actually my absolute favorite playlist. So just to give you an idea of what I'm usually listening to while cooking. Let's get back to the sauerkraut. I did not purchase a very large head of cabbage because I didn't want to make 4 jars. I just wanted to make 2 quart-sized mason jars. So this is just a medium head of cabbage. I am peeling off the outer leaves, and then I am going to peel an additional leaf or 2 that are in good shape that I'm going to set aside, and we will be using those whole leaves later in the recipe on the top of the sauerkraut. So set those aside and hold on to them. One way that you can get the core out of your cabbage is to bang it on a hard surface, and that will loosen the core. But I don't want to do that because I don't want to damage any of my cabbage for this sauerkraut. So I am just going to cut the core out and slice it down the center. Give it a quick rinse, and then we'll begin slicing it. And I like to do it by hand. You can use a food processor. I've done that in the past where I use the shredding blade, and it works really well. But I wanted to do it by hand this time because I wanted the pieces to be a little bit bigger than when you shred it in a food processor. And this is the thickness that I was looking for. It still holds its shape, and when it's done fermenting, it will still be really crunchy and crispy while retaining that delicious fermented sauerkraut flavor. I am going to pick through my cabbage that I cut up. And the one thing I'm doing is just looking for big pieces like this to pull out and cut them a little thinner. That's what happens when, at least for me, when I hand cut, is there's always a couple of large chunks. I'm going to get these chopped up and put back into the bowl. This is the salt that I like to use for all of my fermented foods. I did use Celtic salt before and I really liked that, but I can't get the specific brand I liked, so I've been using this one for the last 2 years. I'm going to measure out 2 teaspoons of this salt and dump it onto the cabbage. There are different methods for fermenting. There is dry packing, And then there is also making a brine for your fermented foods. I'm gonna do a little bit of both. I started with the 2 teaspoons of salt on this, and then I'm also going to make a brine when I go to pack the jars. One of the best parts about making sauerkraut is this step here. I am getting all of my tension out and all of my stress by working this cabbage. I am making sure that I'm squeezing it, I'm pressing it, getting all of that salt really worked in. I'm gonna let this sit now for about 30 minutes to soften up and create a juice. I'm grabbing my 2 quart-sized mason jars, and then I also grabbed a half-quart jar in case I had extra, although I ended up not having extra, which was great. I'm also going to get out my jar weights as well as my burpers. I have quite an extensive collection of burpers when it comes to fermenting. I have the ones where you put the liquid in the top. I have these that don't really have a pipe. They just have like a little flap at the top. And then I have the pickle pipes. I, at least for me, have found that the pickle pipes work the best for all things that I ferment. It allows gas to escape, nothing molds inside, and they're just really easy to clean and maintain. These were already previously washed, but before I go to make anything, I always like to wash them one more time to just guarantee that they are free of bacteria and clean. In the meantime, I got a fresh towel out, and I'm going to put my jar weights along with my pickle pipes and my clean jars onto this towel and let them air dry a little bit. The other 2 key ingredients for this German sauerkraut recipe are juniper berries, and this is what they look like. The other ingredient is caraway seeds, which I'm getting low on these. I'm going to have to get more. I'm also going to get my brine mixed up. You have 2 options here when doing your brine. You can weigh out your water and then do the calculation to make a 2% salt brine. Or you can measure out 2 cups of water and add 2 teaspoons of salt. Whatever method you prefer. I want to give the salt brine a really good stir so that that salt dissolves and I can get it incorporated into the water. The next thing we're going to do is grind up our caraway seeds. I put them in my mortar and pestle, and I ended up adding 1 teaspoon of caraway seeds and then gave them a pretty decent grind. I don't want them to be a powder. I still want them to obviously be seeds, but just broken up a little more. It's been 30 minutes, and I am now going to give the cabbage even more of a workout, I guess if you want to call it. I am going to work on squeezing it really hard and pressing it and mixing it around so that it releases even more of the liquid. I also like to use my jar tamper in order to press more of the liquid out of the cabbage. You can see the cabbage is starting to get a little bit wetter. Now I'm going to add the caraway seeds, and I'm also going to add the juniper berries here. I ended up adding probably 2 tablespoons of juniper berries because I wanted that really strong flavor. I'm just going to keep working the cabbage, getting those flavors in, and every once in a while I like to pick it up and squeeze it between my hands to see if any liquid starts coming off of it. That's how you know you're getting pretty close to being able to pack the jars. I didn't want to overdo the brine, so I added about a cup or so in first and then mixed it around. I'm going to reserve the rest of the brine in case I need it to top the jars off at the end. Now it's time to just start packing the jars. So I put about a half a jar's worth of shredded cabbage in, and then I press it down with my tamper. And I press it really aggressively because I want it to release as much juice as possible. I could see that it was still pretty dry, so I added a bit of my brine in, and then I'm going to very carefully press it so that I don't overflow the jar and make a mess. Make sure when you are packing your jar and you get towards the top that you leave room for the cabbage leaf along with the weight. I've got my big cabbage leaf here, and I'm just going to give it a good wash and dry it off before I put it in the jar. I also like to rip off the hardest part of the stem of it because that's a little difficult when you're trying to press it into a round jar. I'm going to bend it and fold it and press it down into my jar. And then I'm going to take my jar weight and put that right on top. And this will help prevent any smaller pieces of cabbage getting to the surface and then growing mold on them, or calm yeast. I topped it off with a little bit more brine, and then I'll put my pickle pipe on, and this jar is ready. This cabbage is ready to ferment, and we are going to put it on the counter for 3 weeks. What I like to do is put it in a small baking dish because it will bubble and overflow, and you don't want that liquid all over your counter. So this works really well to prevent that. I like to take a dry erase marker, write on it what it is and the date that it is ready. So we are doing 3 weeks from today's date. I thought I would quickly show you 2 other things that I'm making right now. This is a jar of sage honey, and it helps with hot flashes. Really excited about this one. And this is going to be ready on 11/2. And then this is a jar of lemon balm, and it's an anxiety easer. And the only thing that's in this jar is a little bit of honey, vodka, and fresh lemon balm from our garden. It has been 3 days, and as you can see, the top of the pickle pipes are kind of bulging, which is great. There's a lot of gas in these jars, and it's expanding. And there is liquid in the bottom of the baking dish, which is why I said you should put something under it. It has been 3 weeks, and our German fermented sauerkraut is ready. I am very excited because I have been craving this, and all I can do is just stare at it on the counter every day and think, oh, I wish it was done. As you can see, the color changed a little bit to be kind of a tannish color from bright green. What I'm going to do is get my washcloth out and wipe off the outsides of the jars because they are going to have a salty crust from the jars burping. I'm going to remove the lids, the pickle pipe, the jar weight, and the large leaf of cabbage that we put at the top of each jar. There is no mold inside the jar, which is an excellent sign. If you had a little bit of the white calm yeast on the lid or on the lip of the jar, you could take a paper towel and just wipe that off the lip, and you would be good to eat your sauerkraut. I always like to taste test all of my ferments, make sure that they have the right flavor, and make sure that something didn't go weird with them. So as you can see, this is nice and crispy, and the flavor is perfect. It is exactly what I wanted. And I had to stop myself from eating more because I really wanted to have several scoops of this. One thing I'd like to mention before I go is that when you're working with fermented foods, as soon as you heat them, they lose their good gut bacteria. So with this fermented sauerkraut, it's preferable to eat it cold. So what I'm going to do is put this in the fridge, and then when I want to make like a burger and put cheese on it and then top it with sauerkraut, I am not going to heat that sauerkraut at all. I'm just going to put it on top of a hot burger. That way I'll still retain the good gut bacteria. Thank you so much for joining me at Witch Hollow Homestead today. I hope you found this video helpful and inspiring. I have so many more great videos that I can't wait to share with all of you, so stay tuned. Happy homesteading!